The Galene Woman interviews someone special. So you'll probably already notice that this week is a little bit different because I'm not on my own. I have been thinking a lot about the first person that I really wanted to come on this podcast and talk about self-care with, who truly understood my opinion and truly understood where I was coming from. And what better way to do that than with somebody that's known me my entire life. Yes, that's right. This episode is me and my mum getting deep, getting real, pulling out all the stops when it comes to self-care. Take a listen. Okay. What did we write? So we talked about this a bit before.
Is this recording?
Yeah, Mum, it's been recording for the past 5 minutes.
Oh, okay. I'm just checking because, I can't see the little lines on the screen.
Look.
So. No, it's fine. I don't need to see it. It's not.
It's been going for the past 2 minutes. Obviously, you and I have talked about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And had probably a million conversations around looking after ourselves. And how, I don't know, I guess let's just start with your thoughts.
On self-care?
Yeah. Because I feel like,
I think
probably
it's
a better starting point than me just...
It's definitely something that I would say is has become more relevant, more part of my consciousness than when I was probably your age.
I was going to say, do you think that's because of me, or do you think that's just because,
I think it's twofold. At 21, you feel like you're immortal and you can do anything, be anything, and illness and long-term looking after your skin or body or whatever. It just wasn't in my head, and probably not in lots of people's heads. At that point, just because it wasn't so much of a thing.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, yes, there was lots of different moisturisers and skincare products and, all of that sort of stuff out there. But I didn't understand a lot of it. I still don't understand a lot of it. Let's face it, I get you to look at the ingredients on a package now and tell me whether I should buy it or not. And that lack of understanding for me probably comes from my upbringing.
Yeah.
And not having a mum that was particularly interested in any of that stuff. It was very basic.
Yeah.
Yes, you need moisturiser. Here you go.
Here's some deodorant.
Here's oil of Olay, as it used to be called back in the day.
What is that?
Olay stuff. Oil of Olay. Oh, anyway.
I was like, do I know?
Olay,
the brand.
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. Yes, they decided to change it from a U to an O. God knows why. But anyway.
I feel like that does make more sense, though, as a word.
Yeah. Well, yes, probably. I don't know. But, it was very much like, yes, you need deodorant. Yes, you need a moisturiser.
Yeah.
A little bit of makeup, maybe. But it was...
Grandma's still on the blue eyeshadow. So.
Well, not quite, but...
She is!
I can't remember the last time I saw her with eyeshadow, to be fair, so...
I guess the check will be for her birthday.
It will, yeah. But it just wasn't part of my upbringing. And then obviously, because I've got 2 older brothers and my dad...
Yeah.
It's not like you, where you've got 2 sisters and...
Predominantly female household.
Exactly, and kind of bouncing ideas off each other and that sort of stuff. And yes, of course I had friends, but again, it just wasn't in the press. And I think that's big, part of that is social media. We didn't have that instant access to everything that was going on in the rest of the world. Google it wasn't a thing.
go to friends. No, I was just gonna say we're at 2 very different points in our lives. You are 50, I'm in my 20s, and, just from your answer there, I think it's so clear that we've grown up in entirely different environments in terms of how we come to look after ourselves. And I think about how my experiences will obviously relate to the people that are listening and relate to the people that are watching the social media content and interacting with Galene. And a lot of them are obviously close to my age or around my age. Because, you know, I think the biggest difference here is that all of that perspective is coming from the fact that I am single with no kids. You know, I'm a university student, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and as much as I have Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, it's, you know, it's your age of people that are really engaging with the content far more than, you know, well, certainly than I am. And I'm sure lots of people that I know, you know, that are of a similar age, you know, we use social media for probably quite different reasons, and that's why your sort of demographic of people
it's going to be so different.
Are going to be younger, and you know, which is fine, isn't it? And I think it's just, for us, it's just kind of catching up a bit, really, isn't it, I suppose.
So in this point of life, right now, what does self-care look like? Because I feel like, especially for you and I, like the past 5 years, lots of big changes, and you know, even though wildly different in terms of how those experiences have changed for us, you know, that's obviously,
they've impacted us differently, obviously,
but at the same time, so it's kind of like at this stage now, coming close to 50, what
how many times are you going to get that in?
what for you is that?
I think having had 20 years now of being a mum, and obviously there's 4 of you, so that brings its challenges, and that is my own fault. Don't, you know, I'm not blaming anybody else for the fact that I have 4 children. You know, I finally feel like I'm getting to a point where I do have the ability to have time for myself. Don't get me wrong, I still have a million and one things to do in terms of looking after the house, food, washing, cleaning, you know, all those really boring ass chores.
I have such a new level of respect for you, because like, I feel like this is probably the most university student thing I'm ever going to say, but going to university, oh my god, do you suddenly like have this newfound appreciation for your parents and everything that they do.
Absolutely, and you don't realise it until you actually move out, as you say, and have your own space and your own place, and then you're kind of like, oh my god, I've got to keep it clean. Mum's not going to rock up and do that. You know,
got to keep it clean,
and I've got to get my washing done, otherwise I'm going to have nothing to wear. You know, I need to wash my pots up, because if I don't, I've got nothing to eat on or
you
cooking.
You learn the chore. Honestly. Actually, like, cooking is something that if I had the time, I would be so much more comfortable and happy doing. But it's, and like the clean up, like, oh, if I had a dishwasher, my life would be so much easier. But like,
so we still have to put it in.
It honestly is one of those things I just end up doing as I'm cooking. Cause
so
it's just like,
I think one of the things I've kind of, because it has been me on my own for the last 6 years now. You have to learn to not try and do it all.
Oh my god,
because
spiritually relate to that statement.
It's overwhelming. You know, to have the tidiest house and all the washing and all the ironing done, and you know, food, meals prepped, you know, and I think for my part, it sounds really lazy, but part of my self-care is actually to go, do you know what, if the floor needs a hoover, but I can leave it till tomorrow, it's not the end of the world. If I've had a really busy day at work, you know, and for a time work was really full on, certainly pre-COVID, pre-COVID and during COVID, it's been slightly more manageable in the last couple of years, but it's just like you just have to accept you can't always do everything that you want to do.
And I feel like, especially, you know, being honest here, like most people, that's the truth. Do you know what I mean? I feel like you aren't just one of the things I really struggle with when I watch like wellness podcasts, or I listen to these kind of things, and I, you know, consume this content, is like some of the things that people talk about in terms of their daily life just are completely unobtainable or not realistic. And you know, what you've just outlined there in my head is real life.
Yeah.
You know, there are so many men and women who will listen to that statement and think absolutely, because you know, I always really struggle with that whole concept of you have to be doing this and doing that. And I know we've talked about this, you know, in different contexts, but like, you know, you need to be doing all the work you can for university and all the work you can for your side business, and for obviously that's me for Galene, and then I've got to be keeping up my personal life, and I have to be, you know, exercising and eating well, and I have to be you know, thinking about my career and where I'm going in 5 years time, and I need to make myself this, that and the other. And like, so many people online make that feel like it's how you have to be successful and how you have to be living every moment, and I can't do that. And I don't think a lot of people can, because keeping that level of I gotta go.
Yeah, you can't.
You can't.
You absolutely can't.
Physically can't. And you know, there's so many people out there talk about burnout and things like that, and that's where that comes from.
And I think that's the thing where I go, do you know what? If I can't get a particular job done in that day because I am tired and or stressed, or do you know what? I just want to sit down with my kids and actually give you some time, or my partner, or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
It's like, do you know what? That is more important. And it takes a long time to kind of, I think for some people, to get to that awareness of that, you know, that's more important than your house being super clean, or
but it's just like
everything hanging up in your wardrobe neatly. Or whatever it might be.
And it's not laziness. I think that's the other thing that I really want to stress, because I get there will be so many people that kind of listen to that and they'll be like, yeah, but like sometimes I do have to get that job done, and I'm like,
absolutely,
and I feel like you and I are perhaps the best people to ever say we just have to get that done. That just has to happen.
Yeah, don't get me wrong. That's life, isn't it?
Yeah.
Something crops up where you're like, crap, if I don't do that, the consequences are
quite serious. Or
or
you know,
it just makes my life more harder later.
Yeah.
And it's like, so if I do it now, it's done. But it's that acceptance of, you know, if you work and you have kids, and this is obviously from my perspective, if you work, you have kids, you have a house to look after, a social life to maintain, you know, and all you see is people on Facebook or Instagram that seem to be absolutely killing all elements of that.
Yeah.
You know, the pressure that puts on people to try and live up to that standard
is insane.
Is where you then get the burnout, and it's like, do you know what? I'm not prepared to do that. I'm not prepared to be that person. My kids will have the clothes they need to wear. They will have food on the table. It might not be the food that they want that's in the fridge on that day, but you know, sometimes it's tough. This is what you're getting. You know, would my grandmother walk around my house and be tutting at the dust on the windowsills? Probably. But you know what?
That's her problem.
That's her problem, not mine. And you know, I would, you know, I it's just that judgment. It's self-judgment when it comes to that sort of stuff.
But the thing is, it's like, I never ever, I don't know, but I guess this is a question. When you're kind of in those social circles and you're talking about those kind of things, because I feel like that's probably something mums talk about a lot, is just like daily life and daily chores, the complaints of having to ferry kids here and there and, you know, feed them and all this kind of stuff. Does that same judgment come through? Because I feel like that self-judgment, which we feel from looking at social media, you know, I always think, I don't know why this is always what I think. I think I said this to you when we were kind of discussing this. I always think about the Elf on the Shelf thing.
Oh my god. Whoever devised that needs shooting.
I don't know why, but this is what I always think of, because I think it's like, I have such a vivid memory of getting it from my brother, who is 11 now, but obviously we must have got it years back when it first became a thing. But like I remember you talking about seeing posts on Facebook and all this kind of stuff of like the crazy elaborate things people have done, and you know, that self-judgment that you can't be that parent because you haven't had the you know, the hour in the evening to sit and do whatever's required to do that. And I think
what that's guilt. Yeah. From, you know, and it's guilt that if you don't do the latest thing that everyone's going to be talking about at school, that somehow you are damaging your children. Whereas to me, you know, we kind of did it, but obviously there was the odd morning I'd wake up and I'd be like, oh my god, I've forgotten to do the bloody elf on the shelf thing. But I just think there's other things. Your kids are going to be more damaged by
a lot of other stuff.
Yeah. And I think, you know, it's kind of keeping stuff in perspective. Is my 5-year-old son going to remember Elf on the Shelf when he's 25? Vaguely, you know. But is he going to remember the night that I forgot? No, but I am. Yeah. Because that would make me feel bad. And
so
it's
does
like, why
that?
Am I beating myself up about
so
that?
Does that judgment on the playground, I guess, is probably the best expression to use. Did you ever feel it with any of us?
Not about little things like something like an elf. I say little things. Elf on the Shelf is it's a whole month commitment. Isn't it? Let's face it. But I think for me the kind of I don't think other people judged. They might have done.
They didn't voice it.
It wasn't voiced, but I would still feel as a parent that maybe I was failing or something like that if we weren't going on some fantastic holiday that year, or you know, the fact that we ended up renting for a few years, and that kind of perception that renting is somehow lesser than owning your own house, and it's like, well, actually I'm still putting a roof over the head of my kids, you know, and I can afford to do that, so you know, what's the problem, you know. But it does make you feel like somehow you're failing, you know. And that's obviously not a nice feeling. And obviously with Facebook putting out all these, I took my children here and we did this and I made all these amazing memories, and you were like, okay, well, we just went to the beach, you know. But actually,
and had a giggle.
You know, going to the beach is great. It's outdoors. Awesome. It's, you know, you go for a swim, you might you know, you go hunting for shells or stones, or you know, whatever it might be, and it's still a nice, positive, happy experience, and it's learning
that's the more important element.
You know, and just being present for your children, I think is
so important.
For them. We've kind of got off the topic of self-care a little bit, but
well, I do think it's actually in there though, because passing judgment on yourself and what you do is hugely influential in terms of the amount of time you feel like you can give to self-care and looking
you cause yourself.
Because you know, I know we are very similar on this, in that sitting down and spending, well, especially like sitting down for 5 minutes, half an hour, watching an episode of something, reading a book, going out for a dog walk, going and seeing Nigel for whatever, and you know, doing those kind of things. I know both of us, obviously different circumstances, can feel a lot of guilt around, I didn't call mum on Monday, or I didn't do this, or I ended ordering takeout because blah blah blah, or you know, I know both of us, when it comes to the things that we consider self-care, give ourselves a lot of guilt when they don't happen. And I think that's that judgment that we feel from others and feeling ourselves from things like social media happens all the time.
And I think it's actually knowing, you know, I have always read for as long as I can remember. For as long as I can remember, reading has always been part of my life. You know, always read before I go to sleep. You know, it sends me to sleep these days, whereas 30 years ago I would have been up till midnight still reading, because it didn't send me to sleep at that point in my life. And it's actually then being able to say, do you know what, reading and the things that you just said about like taking the dog for a walk, you know, they are actually little pockets of time that I am giving myself. 20 years ago I wouldn't have labelled it as self-care. Probably wouldn't have labelled it as self-care 10 years ago.
No.
But it is, because it's allowing me to completely defocus from where I am and what I need to do that day, and I'm immersing myself in a different world, different lives.
Yeah, and just enjoying it.
it, you know, and
I feel like that's something I definitely grew up with. Like, obviously you talk about it, but like, that rhetoric of like reading and, you know, and I feel like watching movies as well, like less TV shows, more movies, like that immersion into just something new, something different is such a good way to just turn off, and just such a good and simple way as well.
Just takes you away from your own life, doesn't it? And you kind of imagine yourself in whatever it is you're reading.
And I feel like that's often seen as like a negative thing, but I feel like when you're thinking about relaxation, giving your brain some peace is actually the most important part of it. So
and
the dog has just walked in, by the way, guys.
Something you always say on your podcast and in your posts and stuff is it's about what works for you. It's about what self-care is for you. And it's like, you know, if you haven't got a dog, taking the dog for a walk is not going to work for you, you know. But for me, that half an hour of just wandering about with the dog, chucking the ball, you know, stopping her from biting everybody, you know, whatever it might be, you know.
Thinking she's about 10 times as big.
Thinking she's an Alsatian instead of a Yorkshire Terrier. But it allows you to just, you know, I have this horrible habit, and I know you do the same, of talking to myself.
Oh my god, it's so bad. I hate it.
It might only be in I try and do it in my head when I'm out in public, because obviously you look like
slightly deranged.
Slightly strange, but you know, and I kind of just work through. I just think about, I don't know, whatever it is that's in my head that I need to think about and work through, and I talk to myself, and I come to far better conclusions than I do if I'm like sat at my desk, or
because you've actually taken yourself out of that situation.
You know, you're just changing your environment a little bit, aren't you? But it, you know, and yes, the fresh air is good, and yes, the walking is good for me, and you know, all the other sort of accidental benefits that come with it, but actually it's just a way of clearing my head of whatever rubbish is in there at the time. You know, self-care from a skincare, looking after myself point of view, I mean, let's face it, we could all do better, you know, most of us. I certainly could. Skincare wise, I would say that's really come down to you. You know, and that education piece that you do, and that you've obviously done on your website and stuff.
I think it's just like, I feel like, even though
it's not that I didn't use skincare.
No, but
in terms
I
of
think
making
because it's
it work,
so part of my routine, and like, as we say, it's each to their own as to what skincare means. I'm going to be totally honest, my actual routine consists of about 4 products. Do you know what I mean? And, you know, that none of which would be a surprise.
At 21,
wouldn't have thought about
I'd
it.
have had, I do remember going through that Clinique phase of their 3-step, you know, tone, moisture, you know.
They've got a whole new range now. Their toners are great.
And I did use that in my early 20s, but, you know, could I say that was the best thing for my skin? I have absolutely no idea. You know?
The education around like actually what looks after your skin is something.
And was that the right stuff for my age group? I have
no idea.
I have no idea. So you know, and obviously, you know, being the age that I am, and you know, that menopausal wonderful journey that we all have to go through.
So great,
yay! You know, that does all sorts to your hair, your skin, your sleep. You know, and that's a whole different
kettle of fish
kind of battleground of, okay, well, that used to work, but now it doesn't, and I need to do something different. You know, and that's where some of the knowledge that you've got from researching what actually some of these you know,
and was
also
accidental, can I just say, like, because me finding like self-care within skincare came out of before university, thinking, God, I actually want to look after my skin when I go to university, because fun facts, Cambridge water, not it.
Not a good thing.
Not it. Not nice.
But it's something as simple though as SPF.
Yeah.
Now we all know SPF. You know, you need it so that you don't get sunburn.
Reapplying.
You know, and but, and I've seen studies and I've seen things on the telly or whatever over probably maybe only the last 10 years that is talking about you know, SPF is something that we should be wearing every single day. And it's like, you know, I'm nearly 50. I'm a bit late to the party on putting SPF on, but I now do.
Yeah.
Because I'm like, okay, well, we can stop it getting any worse.
Yeah. we can prevent the following damage that is coming.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so it's things like that. So at 21, the fact that you're doing that now, you know,
let's see where it goes. Yeah. Should we see how well the skin goes? I'm not promising anything, guys.
You might still look in your 20s by the time you get to 50 because you've just not had that skin damage.
Yeah.
You know? And it's not that I think I look old or anything like that, but
you don't.
You know, I can guarantee that whole sun thing has definitely
changed.
Yeah.
But I think that's the thing, is like we've all become more aware of the things that can contribute to how we look after ourselves, and things like SPF, things like skincare, you know, that's come later in your journey. That's actually been the start of how I got into all of it, a lot of this. And yeah, I think it's really interesting because, you know, we've talked a lot about the influences we've had that have been wildly different, and I honestly think that a big reason as to why I was quite comfortable in exploring things like skincare and makeup and all this kind of stuff was, even though I am the oldest sister, I have sisters, and you were always really comfortable with using makeup, with engaging in the more feminine things in life, and I've always had lots of female friends and all of this, that and the other. But something I know that we've talked about again before is the lack of female figures you've had in your life in terms of feeling and exploring those things. And I know that's not necessarily the case in terms of friends, but you know, I love my grandma with my whole heart, but you know, I know that there's been certain elements of talking about personal care and what it comes to being, but also things like mindfulness and topics like that, like engaging in a holistic approach to self-care has been something that has definitely been influenced by her. And
well, as we said, or as I was saying earlier, you know, was never self-care it just wasn't even a phrase. So, you know, my mum provided me with the basics of everything. You know, but you know, we wouldn't sit and talk about makeup or, you know, eyebrow pencils or you know, plucking your eyebrows or you know, any of that. It just wasn't part of my mum's language and life, and probably because it wasn't part of her mum's life, and obviously that's very much a generational thing.
I find that so interesting, like looking back on the ways in which, like, generationally speaking, women have looked after themselves and how much that's changed, because, you know, grandma, for instance, like grew up in a forest of Dean, in the middle of nowhere.
Life would have been quite simple in a lot of respects, and therefore not complicated in terms of what was needed in life. You know, and I think as time has gone on, life has got way more complicated. That it becomes more important to actually think about keeping yourself fit and healthy and happy. You know, happy is probably the key thing there. But you know, for my mum and for my grandmother, it would have been very much, you know, that kind of social expectation of you go to school till you're like 14 or 15. Wild. I know. you know, you're then gonna go out and get some sort of job, and yes, you know, my mum could have gone down the route of teacher training or, you know, whatever else might have been there, but you know, and I don't know what stopped her from doing those kind of things. But it was, you know, kind of basic jobs, shop work, factory work, you know, that sort of thing. And then met my dad, you know, moved to Leicester where my dad was from, you know, and you know, she never learnt how to drive. You know, and that was a conscious choice, and probably a financial choice as well. You know, having a 2-car family back in the 60s was not as much of a thing as it is now. You know.
Do you think like a big reason why? Okay, obviously the rhetoric wasn't there, like self-care.
Yeah.
Things like personal care would have been, but like it wouldn't have been framed in the way we're discussing it now. Do you think, though, that her social expectation as a woman was a huge reason why she never lent into that kind of thing?
Possibly. Because obviously, again, generationally, you're talking about what's the role of the woman in society and in the household. You know, my dad went out and had a very manual, heavy duty job.
Yeah.
You know, so my mum would have seen it as, okay, dad's bringing the money in, sort of thing. I need to look after the house, look after the kids, have not such a demanding job, so that it's, you know, it works and it fits in around everything that needs to be done. My mum's self-care would have been reading as well, though, to be fair. I mean, she's always read, and that's, you know, it's where I've got my love of reading from, was from her.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't have been labelled as that. It would have just been, I don't know what label it would have been given, to be fair.
Because like this is always the question I kind of have as to whether or not she ever felt that because she was living at a time where there's obviously the double standard of she would still have had to add a job, but she would have also had to take care of the household, and you know, you weren't in a financial position to have help, which is obviously very different from dad, but like, did she ever find that overwhelming? I think do you know what I mean? Like, that's what I would have really loved to know.
I don't really know the answer to that question, because it's a conversation I could have with my mum now, definitely. But in terms of talking about that sort of thing and how people were feeling about,
because like
and
mentally,
the relationship
that's a lot
between my mum and I you know, just wasn't something that was discussed, really. You know, my dad did a lot for us as well. You know, he always took us out swimming and, you know, helped out. You know, it's not that he wasn't doing anything, but you know, there was still that expectation that, you know, still exists. It really does still exist. That you know, the woman's the caregiver and the, you know, the person that looks after the house, and I think it's gradually changing as generations go on, because you guys are just not going to accept that.
Absolutely not. Well, but this is what I mean.
Rightly, and like, probably not accept that because of what you've experienced growing up. And what you've seen growing up, and how, you know, how those dynamics work.
Changed,
you know.
Because to kind of fill people in, obviously dad came from a very different background in terms of that. Like I would say what you're describing is a relatively working class background, very normal. A lot of people your age will have grown up in that kind of environment too, and there's kind of nothing complicated about it in terms of woman as caregiver, man as the breadwinner, and you know, the stereotypical kind of things that women do off the back of that would have been the things you would have seen. And although obviously we can only speculate as to how that made grandma feel, and what mentally that did, and what and all those kind of things. My dad's parents, man, we're gonna call them mama and dad, and we're gonna go there.
That's fine.
My mama, very different. And I feel similar age, but very different. And I feel like talking to her would have been even more interesting because
she was given some opportunities.
She had a very, very different lifestyle.
I mean, you know, she went on to be a teacher, and you know, was basically second in command at a private school. You know, did all the admissions and and absolutely worked a
butt off.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, only child. My mum wasn't an only child. She did have a sister who died. At 21. So that was, but you know, my mum would have been a bit older.
Home by that point.
My mum had. Yeah. But very, very different in terms of
what she grew up, like what Mama grew up with.
Yeah, and I don't know. I think I said to you when we were talking the other day that you know her family background, going back further, her dad was part of the family that basically ran the local bank.
Yeah,
this
is in Wales.
this is in us.
This is back country Wales.
Well, you know, but he didn't want to do that. He wasn't interested. He wanted to be a plumber of all things. And basically, turned his back on the family and the wealth. Yeah, and there was wealth there because they were in the banking industry. And was like, no, my life is what I want it to be. I want to go out and, you know, work 9 till 5, but I want my time. Basically, work-life balance in the 1950s is ultimately, you know, he was well ahead of his time.
He knew it.
Yeah. So, you know, she'd come from that kind of background about in terms of you do what you want to do, you know, and you pursue what you want to pursue. Whereas, you know, that just wasn't where my parents came from.
No.
You know, Mama was an only child, so maybe financially, even
just because of that,
it meant there was other opportunities. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
But saying all of that, and yes, she had all these opportunities, and she obviously earned, you know, more money and all of that sort of stuff off the back of it. There was still an expectation that she was the caregiver and the person that looked after the house and the food and the washing and the ironing.
Because even though I know, obviously, when, as I say, when we've talked about this before, you've said that they did have help.
Yeah, but that
how
was later
much
in life.
Yeah, like how much and when was going to be my question, because it's kind of like, and not that you will necessarily know that, but I do just feel like
they had a cleaner.
Yeah,
and that's it.
That's it. She still cooked. She still, you know, did a lot of that.
I think the cleaner might have done some ironing, maybe. I don't know, but I mean, and I don't.
It's like that's basically what we're getting at, is that that's the environment Dad grew up in.
Yeah,
and that massively changed, I think, our household, because Mama's expectation, you know, would have been that you took her role, right? Yeah. And Dad's therefore expectation would have been that that's what you did.
Yeah.
And I feel like there is no way on earth, as much as Mama was a very happy person, and that's what I remember about her a lot, is just the charisma and the level of energy of that woman is insane. Absolutely. But there is no way on earth she did not feel like she had no time for herself. There's no way.
I can't think of what she would have done for her own self-care. She read. I do know that. I keep coming back to books, but, you know, she did read.
You and Dad are two English teachers.
Well, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, she, in my head, you know, we're talking about the 1950s.
She would have had a far busier social life than my parents ever did. You know, and she did love people. Yeah. She absolutely loved people. But you're right, your dad's expectation was still quite old school. You know, he went out and earned the money. And it wasn't that there was any kind of, that means I couldn't have a career.
No.
You know.
But that's obviously because Mama, you know, did.
Yeah, you know. But if there was ever sacrifices to be made in terms of who's going to look after the children and run around doing ballet clubs on a Saturday and parties and after school, you know, it that did always fall on me. Your dad saw his sacrifice as not necessarily being there all the time,
which
to be involved with some of that, you know, debatable if you then would have been involved in some of that, but that's a whole different
that's a whole different issue. No, but what I was gonna say is like, well, just the dynamic. I feel like that understanding of you make the sacrifice by being at home and he makes the sacrifice being away, I feel like that affected my childhood in comparison to Nate, because there's a 10-year gap between the two of us.
Yeah.
I feel like that affected me way more than that affected him. Like, I feel like what affected Nate was the later stuff.
Yeah.
And obviously you know, you guys separated when I was 15, and that kind of change was his drama, shall we call it?
Yeah.
But for me, like, it was the fact that Dad was just like, for the first 10 years of my life, he was there, but like,
not there.
Was he?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
And I get why that was the expectation, and I get that he would definitely have come out with the comment, that wasn't what I wanted, it was what I had to do.
Yeah.
But in terms of how that's impacted you and how that's impacted your life and the way you've been able to care for yourself and the way, you know, our household runs on the way we look after ourselves, and how taking breaks looks like that and looks like they don't melt.
It made self-care at that point in my life, when you guys were all younger, very, very difficult.
Yeah.
You know, I would say, because even kind of just going out and socialising with friends generally involved lots of children as well, because all the mums would bring their kids. So yes, that was great to have a chat with friends and kind of unwind. In that respect, there was always kids around that needed, you know, the potty or feeding or you know, whatever it might be. So it
common ground.
Yeah, it was great, and it was a way of perhaps letting off a bit of steam. But I wouldn't call it necessarily. I mean, it was self-care in a way, but not in the way that actually probably
was beneficial.
Yeah, it doesn't do the good that you need it to. I don't.
You had common ground with the people there, in terms of your.
But I don't think, you know, reading a book was probably the only bit of time that I would take for myself, and even that could be
just before
heavily interrupted.
Sorry.
You know, so it's. I don't think I really took time for myself at all until
dead ass would say post-COVID.
Yeah,
well, I know you did, because obviously, so what, that was 2018 when your dad separated, and like you did go out and see your friends more, and you did do a lot more like social things and kind of, you know, as you would have expected in that situation. Like, you didn't want to just be in the house. Totally fair.
Yeah.
But I feel like a stable, calm, this is my time. I feel like post-COVID, because as you say, like, work, what was that?
Yeah.
You know, we're all in this house.
Well, I went from, you know, kind of part-time. I still worked every day, but I finished at like 2:15 because I was doing the school run. That's what we were saying earlier. So you'd do the school run, you'd get home, and the school run, because of where we lived, just took
2 hours,
probably an hour, you know, at least, to do all of that, for picking you up from all the different various schools, going back to having 4 kids again. You know, but you'd come home and it would be, right, let's think about tea, because you guys would want to eat by 5 or 6 o'clock. Your dad never wanted to do that. Yeah. So it was almost like a 2 dinner situation. So I'd deal with you guys, and then of course, you know, when Nate was still younger, obviously I'd be putting him in the bath and doing bedtime routines, and then probably thinking about eating again, or not eating again. But I wasn't eating 2 dinners. But
I know what you mean. Cooking again, because he wouldn't cook himself. Well, not always. I feel like Dad cooking, like Dad doing the household chores,
involved all of you.
Involved all of us, for starters. Like, there was no way that wasn't gonna be like, everyone has to do this. But also, I feel like this is the bit that really annoys me when I think about like how much time you ended up sacrificing in terms of just working for everyone else and doing everyone else, is like Dad feeling like he had to be commended for the fact that he did the job. Yeah. Like, that whole idea, and I know there are so many men out there, there's so many partners out there who feel like them ironing for the first time in a month, like, is something that needs to be celebrated. Like, that drove me nuts.
It. I absolutely hate it.
It's like, I cooked a meal for you. Just to come sit down, enjoy the time, be present with your kids.
Forget the fact that I cooked the other 6 meals that week, and you haven't said thank you once. I mean, and that. Oh my god. And I can't. That's just.
But do you know what I mean? Like, that irritation And I feel like it's such a female thing. It's such a female
And the
thing
problem
to
is
turn
we
around
just
and
get
be
on
like,
with it.
yeah, I'll just
Yeah.
get on with it. And like, I feel myself subconsciously doing things like that.
Yeah.
Even just like romantic partners. Like, obviously I'm 21. There's never
Yeah.
been anything else other than just boyfriends and things like that. But
Yeah.
I would do things, not be thanked for it, consistently, and it would drive me nuts
Yeah.
because I could feel that like internal resentment that I witnessed
It's
between you and Dad
Yeah.
in my own experiences.
Yeah.
And that would just like, would mean that I wouldn't feel like I could relax and I could sit down and do anything until I'd done the thing that I know the other person was expecting me to do.
Absolutely. But it's why you're not going to put up with it.
Absolutely
Whoever
not.
you end up with in life is because, you know, the resentment is huge, and it causes all sorts of other
Problems.
issues.
But I do feel like it's like, I'm sure there are cases out there where it is like the male over the female.
equal. Yeah.
But
could be either.
I witness it in the women, the older generation of women in my life, more than anything.
Yeah.
And I think that's the crux of what we've been
But
talking
this is
about.
why you guys have to change it.
Yeah.
So that you don't have to do
that.
Because then if you are equally sharing, you know, jobs and stuff to do with the kids and all of that kind of jazz, then you both have the potential for time to yourself and for yourself, you know,
And then
you,
also each
and
other.
not feel guilty about it, and each
Yeah.
other, absolutely, because that's really important. But you know, there's nothing worse than being like, I really want to just go upstairs, lie down, read a book for half an hour, whatever it might be,
And not feeling like you can.
and not feeling like you can because there's X amount still left to do, and you know the other person's not going to do it. I mean, it's just a recipe for disaster. It really is.
And
you know,
reflecting back on earlier comments we made about Mama and Grandma and kind of those dynamics, like it makes sense why Dad did not understand why that was a problem. Like, I'm not saying it's an excuse at all, but I'm saying like it makes sense why women feel like that they have to do those kind of things subconsciously.
But you have to be heard, don't you?
Yeah.
You know, if you see that sort of stuff happening, you have to shout it out, and you've got to be heard, and you've got to, you know. And it's difficult because, you know, mums still do a lot of stuff.
Yeah, no, of course they do.
But, you know, shit happens in life, and
Shit happens.
yeah, and, you
Go
know,
to phrase.
absolutely, you know,
Yeah.
and it's, you know, and obviously with your dad passing away, that's a whole different kind of,
Yeah.
Christ, I really do have to look after myself now, and I do need to put myself, you know, not to the forefront as such, but I do need to make sure I have that time so that I do not go to
Crumbs.
mentally go to crumbs.
Yeah.
Because you guys don't have anybody else.
Yeah.
You know.
I feel like, because obviously that happened in 2021, so it's been like 3 years now.
Yeah.
Almost.
Nearly.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
But that kind of self-care is a whole different ballgame.
It is. It's a whole step up.
It's a
isn't it?
whole step up. But like, I think sometimes it does take those really impactful moments, and you know, as I said at the beginning, like the big life moments that have happened for both of us over the past 5 years that have really changed the way we look after ourselves and think about taking time off. Like, it's why when I go into university and like I'm sat there and I'm thinking, oh my god, if I've done really bad on this, like it's gonna be really bad, and oh my god, I can't cope with this, blah, 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 you know, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That I kind of just say it doesn't matter. If I feel like this right now, I am not going to be able to produce a good piece of work because I physically won't be able to. Do you know what I mean? When you're in a bad headspace, you're not going to be able to do good work, and you have to take the break, and you have to turn around and say, this is not working. I need to refocus and reset. And situations like Dad make you sit there and think, I have to do that. Yeah. Because if I don't, I'm gonna be on the floor. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like I tried to force myself into situations after Dad, like so many times, put myself into things that would make me feel better, supposedly, when in reality what I should have been doing in that moment when I was feeling the way I was stepping back and thinking, I need to relax. And going out, seeing friends, or going to work, things like that. Like I shouldn't have been doing some of those things.
Yeah. And it's hard though, isn't it? Because there's probably part of you that sits there thinking, if I just take myself away from everybody and do and sit here on my bed or on the sofa or
whatever,
that just the sadness of everything is obviously just going to overwhelm you, and you're going to be like, and I can't deal with that, I'd rather just deal with
something else,
and it's a hard grief's a hard thing to
navigate and
it is difficult.
But I do think, as much as it's incredibly difficult, it has made looking after myself now so much easier.
Yeah, and I think
because I can rationalise it.
And I mean, I've always been I try very hard not to worry about stuff that I can't control, and that I can't, and I don't know is actually going to happen. So it's that sort of worrying about stuff that might actually never happen, and also thinking about, okay, well, if that does happen, what is the worst that comes off the back of that, and I've always been quite good at that. I can compartmentalise quite nicely, and I can kind of have a really shitty crap day at work, but the minute I switch that laptop off, I can be happy and I'm with my kids, let's have a nice meal, or whatever, let's do this, let's do that, whatever it might be. But you still have to deal with some of that shit. You can't just ignore it completely.
No, of course.
But
time and place. I think that's what that is.
Time and place. But walking the dog and talking to myself about whatever it is, it's that time and place of kind of just, and I know you do a lot of journaling, and it's the same sort of thing. It's that download of information that you just need to get out of your head, isn't it?
Yeah,
but
sure.
But yeah, it does make you want to, look after yourself more when shit like that happens in life.
I think so. Because
certainly for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. Because it's kind of like, I think about why I started Galene. I think about the things that have motivated me so much to just not only to show women that, like, we may have all of these, like, generational things that we have been told over and over again. We may have had relationships and experiences that have made us feel like, our purpose, our function is simply to be there for others and do everything for everyone else, or to push super hard with our career and be career women and like do all of these kind of things and be the best we can and like always be running for the next step and the next goal. There's a kind of a multifaceted way that can be taken, but that step back and that there is so much to life other than that thing.
Yeah.
Because this is my life too. And the way I live it, it's finite, and the way I live it is my decision. And there has to be an off time in that.
Yeah.
There has to be, sitting down reading with the kids, whatever, go and have a dog walk. Seeing the people that I can switch off with and can unwind with, and doing your evening ritual of whatever that makes you feel just calm, like you've actually unwound yourself from the stuff that's pulling you up and tight and making you feel bad. Like, I feel like everything we've kind of explored over the past hour sorry, Rose, has highlighted that time of rest, whatever that rest is essential.
And it does, and like you always keep saying, it doesn't actually matter what that is and what form that takes.
Yeah. You just got to do it.
You just got to do it. You have different pressures to what I have.
Yeah.
And your sisters have different pressures to what both of us have, and different things that are pulling us in different directions, And
Nate has
unfortunately,
Nate is 11.
But and as you get older, you're going to be, all of you, you're going to be finding work, or buying a house, or maybe having kids one day, and all of these added things that you add to your life, that you add to your life because in some respects you need to, because you need a job, you need money, kids house. It's a
if you want them kind of thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'd love to own my own house, and then I could do what I want to it. You know, it's a nice to have, but it comes with its own set of pressures. You know, and as does then having a family. It's like you fall in love with somebody, you want to have babies together or whatever, or adopt children or whatever it is you want to do. You know, and it's like, that's great because you can see all the positive benefits of how much that's going to enhance your life, but then it also does bring with it a lot of other things that you've then got to fit into your life. You know, and it is about fitting it all in a way that works.
It doesn't have to be like, I feel like the word that always comes out is like balanced, and I know I've used it as well, and like
and getting that balance is really
balance
hard.
Doesn't have to look like even. I think that's always the thing I try and remember and tell myself, like, sometimes you're gonna need more of a break than you're gonna be able to work, and sometimes you're gonna need to work more than you can take a break, and that's fine.
And that is also, you know, you can also say that about a relationship, going back to that sort of whose role is whatever. It's like, it might be that for a period of time you are the one doing the housework and the cooking and the cleaning for whatever reason, but then it's that, you know, when I need you to step up as my partner to be that person,
go and do it,
you know, for them,
do it,
for them to be there, exactly. Just crack on, you know, and for things to not become kind of habitual, that because you've had to step up for 6 months because they've broken their leg or whatever it might be, you know,
done their back in.
It's then like, okay, well, you're up and about again. This is not how life is. It, you know, should be.
Yeah.
You know, you need
calling them out on it.
Yeah, you know.
I feel like, especially from my perspective,
but it doesn't have to be an equal balance all the time.
That question becomes harder because it's obviously you're holding yourself accountable. You know, you're holding yourself. Okay, I've just spent, like, especially with Cambridge, like with the whole like 8 week on, 8 week off kind of thing. Like, I spent 8 weks absolutely working my arse off. Yeah. You know, and I'm not just working my arse off for my degree, which is it's a thing. In terms of how much they put me through. Yeah. But I'm also running Galene, I'm also doing a social life, I'm also like being a 21-year-old. Yeah. And then I suddenly have this period of time where I feel guilty about the fact that I'm not getting up every morning at 7:30 and I'm sitting down and I'm working. Yeah. Like I really struggle when I come home, or you know, I come off from my breaks to sit there and do nothing. And you know, I've said this to you.
Why do we carry so much crappy guilt around with us all the time? Because that's all that is you're making yourself feel guilty for something that you shouldn't do. And I know we all do it.
Yeah, but it comes back to obviously what we were talking about. Like, we witness it in everything. It's like, I don't just see it in you. I see it in my friends' mums and the way that they behave. Like, I can probably think of one person, and she'll know who she is, like, when I say this, whose mum, like, her parents did not have a conventional experience. Like, her parents were never married, and you know, their relationship was always friendly and always kind, but like, she was a kid of two people who were never married and never in a relationship. And it meant that her mum's life was so different. Yeah. She's the only person I can think of in terms of all the mums or the grandparents or the teachers who were, like, obviously, you know, female, had kids, whatever, who behaved in a way that wasn't what we're just describing, which is this continual guilt for living our lives in a particular way. Yeah. Like, say what you will about the Barbie movie, like, your opinion may be that it's trash, but the speech that America Forever gives, I know, like, we both cried at it, because I think that's what we're talking about. We can't win. Yeah. Like, no matter what we do, no matter whether we take a break or we don't, we can't win. And it's like that frustration that we're talking about on, like, a real life level here. Like, not like I'm a celebrity and all this kind of stuff. Like, you have problems, honey, I'm sure, but like, we're talking just like general people here, like that.
I hate to say it, but you know, I that ultimate speech that she did in that movie, you know, all of those expectations of being thin but not being too thin and all,
not working hard, but don't be bossy, blah blah blah.
It's all from a patriarchal society point of view.
Yeah, no, of course it is.
And
we're talking about problems we cannot solve
right
now.
That's a huge,
Yeah, it's a huge thing, but it's also
thing. But you guys will change it, and each generation will change it a little bit more.
Yeah,
and
it's nothing new. It's nothing that I think anybody listening to this will be like surprised by. I'm not thinking of it that way, but I also do think what is perhaps new is thinking about, okay, we live in a society where we can't win. We have to work hard. We have to give all our time to other people, blah, 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 blah. But it also means that because of all of these expectations and all of these different things that we tell ourselves internally, these aren't like, things that someone's shouting at us. Like, we literally feel these to our core. Like, everything I have ever said on this podcast, everything I've ever said on Galene, everything you've ever said to me, everything I've spoken to my friends about, it shows that these are ingrained ideas.
Yeah.
Also means we never ever feel like we can take a moment for ourselves.
Yeah.
Ever. Because of all of it. Like, that's what that also means, is that our personal time is inferior to our dealings with all of this.
When it should be just as important.
Exactly.
If not more so.
Exactly.
Yeah. And after your dad passed away, the whole work thing, I'm very fortunate now that I do have what I would consider the right work-life balance.
I would say so.
But I've only had that in the last couple of years, so it's taken a lot of time to get to that position and ask for it and be like, do you know what, I cannot be a single mum of 4 kids with a full-time job. I am going to absolutely
hit floor.
I would be a wreck in the corner by now if I had carried on trying to do that. And do you know what, why should I have had to have waited
that long,
30 years of my working life to get to that point, and have the right work-life balance. If you want to work part-time as a 21-year-old, and absolutely do it, people will tell you there's all these financial considerations about, pensions when you're older.
And this is coming from someone that works in finance, just to go on.
Absolutely. And people say, oh well, you need to get the work in to get your national insurance contributions in, so you get your state pension, and get into a pension scheme so that you get your company pension scheme.
Or, the fact that I'm 21 and thinking about that is wild to me.
Or self-invested pension, or whatever the hell it is that is the right route for you. It's like, but you've still got to live your life now. Yes, do all those planning bits and do what you can, and and don't ignore it, but equally don't make it
everything
the only thing that you think about, because
I feel like it's so easy.
Your life is the fact that I am 50 this year scares the crap out of me. You kind of think, Christ, where's the last, I still feel like I came out of university like 2 years ago, and it's 30 years ago nearly, and you're just like, oh my God, how time really does, I know we all say it, but time really does fly.
And I think as perhaps a good message to end on, shall we say?
We'll go with that.
Of like, this is your life. My dad said many a thing that frustrated me to high end, but one thing that he did always say that I will absolutely stand by is, you have to make the most of it. This is your life. This is what you have to do. And rest will look different to every single person out there. And that's okay. That's not what we're critiquing. No. What we're critiquing is the guilt and the shame that you feel about taking that time. Why should your life be dictated by anything else other than you and what you do with it? And I think that's what's most important, really.
Absolutely.
I think that's, your life is yours. You deserve to spend it and live it how you want. And no social pressure, no person, no job, stress should come before that. How am I? First question should always...
There'll be hurdles. But,
Oh God, The first question should always be, okay, this is the hurdle. How am I going to deal with the hurdle? And how am I going to look after myself in the process? That's what that question should be. It's double. It's two questions in one.
Yeah.
I think that's how it should always be.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah. I think we can do that. We can try.
Bring it on.
For those of you who are curious and who have started listening to us because of the giveaway, I am very, very sad to say that it is now over, but we have had some of the most incredible entries. The submissions to the Galene Summer Giveaway questionnaire were perhaps the best thing I have ever read in my life. We are so thankful. Congratulations to our winner. Honestly, thank you all for coming and listening and putting your name in the hat. It's been amazing. Thank you very much.